Canada, apparently they're throwing tariffs on manatee meat and bovine semen, which means The View is very unhappy.
Oh, it's not even that. And The View, you don't need to find Trumpers. You need to fire your race baiters.
Yeah.
You need to fire the two races. You've had people. You had a McCain on there. You've had people on there before, and you ran them off. So the racist ones who want to stick to this, Whoopi and Sonny, and was it Bette Midler? What's her name? The broke-ass Bette Midler. Fire them and bring people in. Maybe you could get McCain to come back. She was a Republican, but every show and every break, she was nearly in tears because she was being attacked.
Ever wonder what happens when television personalities clash from across network lines? It's like watching worlds collide without the participants ever sharing the same room. Recently, a fascinating exchange unfolded when comments from Greg Gutfeld and Tyrus seemed to strike a nerve with Whoopi Goldberg. What followed wasn't just memorable. It was a masterclass in how media figures respond when their viewpoints get challenged from afar. The aftermath? A television moment that had social media buzzing for days. Have you ever noticed how sometimes the most revealing reactions come not from direct confrontations, but from comments made in entirely different venues? This is exactly what happened, and the resulting fallout was both educational and, frankly, entertaining. Ready to dive into this fascinating case study in public discourse? Because this isn't just about personalities, it's about how we communicate in today's fragmented media landscape.
Happy Wednesday, everyone. Well, not if you're Whoopi Goldberg, a.k.a. Karen Johnson. Yeah, who knew Whoopi was a Karen? I thought that was only for white people, like Toyota Priuses and skiing. Roll it, Francis.
Good morning and welcome to The View. You all saw the news. Whoopi will be back here in 2 weeks. Okay?
It's so cute when one of their side gets punished. They sulk like they ran out of raw cookie dough in the green room.
Daytime television has long been a platform where hosts share their perspectives on current events. One particular show has become known for its passionate panel discussions, with Whoopi Goldberg often serving as the moderator who doesn't shy away from expressing her own strong opinions. But what happens when those opinions get scrutinized by commentators from a completely different time slot and network? We're about to explore a remarkable instance where an indirect critique sparked a direct response. Think about it. How often do we see cross-network exchanges that reveal so much about how public figures handle criticism? This isn't just celebrity drama, it's a window into how media narratives form and collide in real time. As someone who's watched these programs evolve over years, I can tell you that what makes this exchange particularly noteworthy is how it lifts the curtain on the sometimes fragile ecosystem of television commentary.
Yeah, ABC suspended Whoopi for 2 weeks because she said the Holocaust had nothing to do with race. She said this on a show called The View, which makes everything about race. Except now.
The Holocaust isn't about race.
No.
It's not about race.
It is. Well, they consider Jews a different race.
But it's not about race. It's not about race.
What is it about?
Because it's about man's inhumanity to man.
Yeah, that's heroically stupid. Even for The View.
The situation unfolded like this. Without specifically targeting any one individual, Greg Gutfeld and Tyrus offered some broad commentary about media figures who make definitive statements despite previous inaccuracies. Though names weren't mentioned, the remarks seemed to resonate with Goldberg, who subsequently responded as though the comments had been directed specifically at her. It's a fascinating example of how media commentary can ricochet across networks and provoke unexpected reactions. Here's what makes this truly interesting. When public figures feel personally attacked by general observations, what does that tell us about their self-perception? Is it possible that when someone takes offense at criticism that wasn't explicitly directed at them, they're unconsciously acknowledging something? This phenomenon isn't unique to television either. Haven't you ever noticed how in any workplace or social circle, general comments about certain behaviors often prompt reactions from specific individuals who weren't even mentioned? That psychological dynamic was on full display here, but magnified by the public nature of the exchange.
So the problem is that you have to go after the racist people. And if the CEO goes, you know what, I'm not going to allow a woman on my show or man that will go after white America and talk about them like dogs. That doesn't represent our ideals or values for anyone. And get rid of those people, and this will clear up real quick. So do you have to actually look in the mirror and clean up your own backyard and get the racist people out? Because that's who you allowed in. You allowed black racists on TV who could just go all day and say anything about white people. And I guess lo and behold, they forgot that there's a lot of people at home, white people at home during the day that are not watching your show anymore. So just clean it up.
Yeah, you know, Emily.
On what would have otherwise been an ordinary broadcast day, Goldberg delivered one of her signature impassioned commentaries about threats to democratic processes, the kind of segment that typically receives supportive applause from her studio audience. Meanwhile, on their late-night program, Gutfeld and Tyrus were addressing a broader theme about celebrity commentators and political discourse. Gutfeld employed his characteristic dry humor to question the credibility of public figures who consistently make strong pronouncements despite questionable track records. Tyrus added a metaphorical perspective that seemed to resonate with their audience. The interesting part? These comments weren't explicitly directed at Goldberg, yet what happened next suggested she felt otherwise. What's particularly revealing about this exchange is how it demonstrates the echo chambers we often create in media. Daytime and late-night television exist in completely different universes, with audiences that rarely overlap. Yet, when these worlds collide, even indirectly, the results can be unexpected and illuminating. Have you ever considered how the timing of these shows affects their content and tone? Daytime television often aims for an emotional connection with viewers starting their day, while late-night commentary tends toward sharper, more satirical takes as viewers wind down. This fundamental difference in approach creates natural tension when their commentaries intersect, as they did in this case.
Yesterday on The View, otherwise known as Hell's DMV, Whoopi Goldberg asked how much different are the values of the Trump administration from the Taliban.
We have a leader who has repeatedly demeaned women,
Right.
wants to defund organizations that benefit women, calling on the media to shut up, specifically wants to give preferential treatment based on religion. Are these values really much different than the Taliban's?
Wow. Talk about groundbreaking to actually hear a celebrity say something mean about the Taliban. How dare they compare them to Trump? The Taliban should sue. Guess they ran out of Hitler analogies. So as they bash the president, I'm reminded how entertainers rarely express any rage over any strand of misogynist Islamism. If they did, we might take their rage toward Trump seriously.
Gutfeld's approach was particularly noteworthy. Rather than naming specific individuals, he spoke broadly about media personalities who might benefit from more humility when discussing complex issues. He joked about commentators who urge others to educate themselves while sometimes demonstrating gaps in their own knowledge, like mispronouncing international locations they're discussing. Tyrus complemented this with his own trademark straightforward analysis, using vivid metaphors to illustrate their points about credibility in media commentary. What makes this situation so intriguing is Goldberg's reaction to these general remarks. Despite not being directly addressed, she responded with visible frustration during her next broadcast, looking directly into the camera with an expression that suggested she felt personally challenged. This wasn't just disagreement. It was a moment where her typical composure appeared to falter under perceived criticism. You could almost see the internal struggle playing out. Should she ignore comments made on another network or address them directly? In choosing the latter, she created a fascinating case study in how public figures handle indirect criticism. Think about it this way. Have you ever been in a room where someone makes a general statement about a behavior, and one person immediately jumps to defend themselves even though they weren't named? That psychological tell is powerful, and when it happens on national television, it becomes a moment worthy of analysis. Was it the content of Gutfeld's commentary that struck a nerve? Or was it the recognition that his general observations might resonate with viewers who watch both programs? Either way, her decision to respond transformed what might have been a forgettable late-night segment into a cross-network moment that revealed much more than likely intended.
Check it out on The View, all right? Talking about Latinos. Watch this, Tyrus.
Latinos in Texas, a district that's 97% Latino, went 75 percentage points for Donald Trump. Why?
Misogyny.
It's on the border.
It's
the border
misogyny.
crisis is on their doorstep. And they were begging people to care about it for years. We need to take some lessons.
That's what that was.
Misogyny and sexism.
Sure.
all that, and the price of butter. Sonny gets the game ball. If it wasn't for her, asking that question, it might have been a closer election.
One of the most discussed aspects of this exchange was Goldberg's signature response when faced with opposing viewpoints, the dramatic sigh that viewers have come to recognize. This exhale, paired with a particular facial expression, has become something of a trademark reaction when discussions don't go her way. Social media users immediately picked up on this moment, turning it into memes and compilation videos. The online community engaged enthusiastically, creating content that highlighted what they perceived as inconsistencies in her arguments. Even typically divided internet forums found common ground in analyzing this television moment. But let's dig deeper here. What does this kind of nonverbal communication actually signal to an audience? When words fail, body language speaks volumes. That sigh, that specific weighty exhale, communicates frustration, dismissiveness, and perhaps even a certain dismissal of the opposing viewpoint as not worthy of genuine engagement. Haven't we all used similar nonverbal cues when we feel cornered in an argument? The difference is, most of us don't do it on national television where it becomes part of our public persona. The viral nature of this reaction raises fascinating questions about how we consume media in 2025. 10 years ago, this exchange might have been watched live by the respective audiences of each show, discussed briefly, and forgotten. Today, it's clipped, shared, analyzed, and preserved indefinitely online. Does this new reality change how public figures should approach these moments? Should they be more conscious of these reactions, knowing they'll live forever in the digital space? The interaction raised these questions about how public figures respond when their perspectives are challenged, especially when they're accustomed to speaking from positions of authority.
But when oh no, nothing really comes to mind, I was like, shing. Listen, they're bitter, they're angry, they're entitled. They also should be. This should have been a reset for everyone who pushed lies and misinformation for the last. They call them Hitler, they call these things. America rejected them. And instead of coming back and saying, we lied, they instead are now doubling down. So let her keep doing it, because if she keeps that up, we're going to keep getting the Senate and probably the House and the White House, because people see right through your lies. So keep doing what you're doing. Game ball to Sonny.
This isn't the first time Goldberg's reactions have generated discussion. Throughout her career on television, she's maintained a consistent approach to presenting her opinions, with absolute certainty and occasional emotional emphasis. When contradicted, her tendency is to double down rather than reconsider. What makes the Gutfeld and Tyrus commentary particularly effective, according to many viewers, was its calm delivery. They simply offered their perspectives without directing their comments at any specific individual. The contrast between their approach and Goldberg's response became the real story for many observers. Some viewers noted the irony of seeing a well-compensated television personality positioned as representing everyday Americans while reacting strongly to indirect criticism from other media figures. This disconnect between claimed representation and actual lived experience is something media audiences are increasingly sensitive to. Ask yourself, in 2025, with trust in media institutions at historic lows, can any television personality truly claim to speak for the people while living a life fundamentally different from most of their audience? This moment also highlighted an interesting dynamic in how different personalities leverage their celebrity status. Goldberg rose to fame as an actress and comedian before becoming a daytime host, bringing that performance background to her current role. Gutfeld came up through publishing and written commentary before transitioning to television. Tyrus arrived via professional wrestling and sports entertainment. Does this difference in background influence how they approach public discourse? Absolutely. The performance aspects of television commentary are unavoidable, but how each personality balances entertainment value with substantive discussion varies dramatically, and viewers are increasingly sophisticated in recognizing this balance.
Sausage maker Johnsonville is recalling more than 42,000 pounds of pork sausage for possible contamination with plastic fibers. Fortunately, authorities were able to track all 42,000 pounds to a single location in New York City.
The pattern of response we witnessed has precedent. Typically, it follows a recognizable sequence, a confident opening statement, followed by studio audience approval, and then visible frustration when contradicting perspectives emerge. What stood out in this case was that Goldberg appeared to take general commentary about media figures as a personal affront. Her reaction suggested wounded pride rather than intellectual engagement with the substance of Gutfeld and Tyrus's points. This approach, framing criticism of ideas as personal attacks, shifts the conversation from intellectual debate to emotional territory, where the focus becomes protecting feelings rather than examining arguments. It's a phenomenon we see increasingly in public discourse, but is it effective? Does it advance conversation or shut it down? When we observe this pattern, we should ask ourselves, what happens to public discourse when disagreement becomes synonymous with disrespect? Consider how studio audiences influence these dynamics. Unlike online viewers who consume content individually, studio audiences provide immediate feedback through applause, laughter, or silence. This creates an environment where hosts receive instant validation that may not reflect broader public sentiment. Have you noticed how differently hosts behave when their studio audience responds positively versus when they face resistance? This instant feedback loop creates a powerful reinforcement mechanism that can insulate television personalities from recognizing when their arguments aren't landing effectively with the wider public. In this particular case, Goldberg's studio audience provided their usual supportive response, potentially reinforcing her position despite the online reaction trending in a different direction.
It's not even that. In The View, you don't need to find Trumpers. You need to fire your race baiters.
Yeah.
You need to fire the two races. You've had people. You had a McCain on there. You've had people on there before, and you ran them off. So the racist ones who want to stick to this, Whoopi and Sonny, and was it Bette Midler? What's her name? Yeah, broke-ass Bette Midler. Fire them and bring people in. Maybe you could get McCain to come back. She was a Republican, but every show and every break, she was nearly in tears because she was being attacked.
Gutfeld's effectiveness in this exchange came from his restraint. Rather than launching direct attacks, he simply highlighted logical inconsistencies in certain types of media commentary. Tyrus complemented this with straightforward observations delivered in his characteristic style. Together, they addressed the concept rather than any specific individual, which made Goldberg's reaction all the more notable. Her co-hosts responded predictably, offering support and affirmations. The exchange illustrated two very different approaches to public discourse, one based on examining ideas regardless of who holds them, and another that interprets challenges to ideas as personal affronts. This dichotomy isn't unique to television. It plays out in workplaces, on social media, and in personal relationships everywhere. But when it happens between public figures, it becomes a teaching moment about communication styles. What can we learn from this contrast? Perhaps that effective communication requires separating our ideas from our identities. When we equate criticism of our viewpoints with attacks on our character, productive dialogue becomes nearly impossible. Isn't it interesting how some people can engage with opposing perspectives without feeling personally diminished, while others seem to experience disagreement as a form of rejection? This psychological distinction was on full display in this exchange, offering viewers an unintentional masterclass in how emotional intelligence influences public discourse. The panel format itself deserves examination here. When co-hosts rally around their colleague regardless of the substance of the criticism, what message does that send to viewers? Does it enhance credibility or undermine it? These are questions worth considering as we consume this type of content.
Their brains are small. But who's the dumbest one of all? True, none of them are in Mensa, but who's the most densa? Perhaps it's Sonny who mastered the art of making idiots look smart. Now, The View could ask a mirror who's the dumbest one of all, but there's no way that glass doesn't shatter.
The public reaction to this exchange revealed much about audience perspectives. Social media commentary suggested many viewers recognized patterns they'd observed before. When every disagreement gets characterized as an attack and critics are dismissed rather than engaged with, audiences begin questioning the overall approach. This exchange also highlighted what some viewers perceive as inconsistencies in Goldberg's positions over time. For example, her defense of certain controversial celebrities while criticizing others for similar behaviors has raised questions about consistency in applying principles. This selective application of standards doesn't go unnoticed in today's media environment, where viewers have unprecedented access to archives of past statements and positions. In an age where every broadcast is preserved, indexed, and retrievable, consistency matters more than ever. Have you noticed how differently we evaluate public figures now that their entire history of statements is just a search away? This archival reality has fundamentally changed the dynamics of public discourse, making it increasingly difficult to maintain contradictory positions over time without accountability. What's particularly fascinating about the online reaction to this exchange was how it transcended typical political divides. Viewers from across the spectrum found common ground in their analysis of the communication styles on display. In our highly polarized media landscape, moments that create this kind of shared analytical frame are increasingly rare and valuable. They remind us that beyond our political differences, we all respond to authenticity, consistency, and good faith engagement, and we all recognize their absence.
So that makes Sunny Hostin, who thinks climate change caused the solar eclipse, the dumbest of them all. Because everyone knows the moon caused the eclipse, which is controlled by the view's gravitational pull. All right, Kat, did you ever see such a group? It's amazing how Joy and Whoopi became the smart ones.
For me, the most shocking thing about the conversation was how truly boring it was. They're like, well, the cicadas, they're cicadas. Okay, but it was like every 100 years. No, it's every 17 years. Do you know how many Emmys this show has?
Throughout her television career, Goldberg has shown a willingness to defend some public figures whose comments have generated controversy, while taking strong stands against others in similar situations. This selective application of principles has not gone unnoticed by viewers. The exchange with Gutfeld and Tyrus brought these patterns into sharper focus. Rather than engaging with the substance of their critique about consistency in media commentary, Goldberg's reactions seemed to confirm some of the very points they were making about how certain television personalities respond to challenges. What this exchange ultimately revealed was something significant about modern media discourse: how effective, calm, reasoned commentary can be when contrasted with emotional reactions. The conversation continues among viewers about which approach better serves public understanding of complex issues. As consumers of media, we have more choices than ever before, not just in terms of content, but in terms of presentation style. Do we prefer commentators who prioritize emotional resonance, or those who emphasize logical consistency? Do we value passionate advocacy over dispassionate analysis? These are personal preferences, certainly, but they also reflect our views on what healthy public discourse should look like. Perhaps the most valuable takeaway from this exchange isn't about any individual personality, but about how we as viewers can become more discerning consumers of commentary. By recognizing patterns of response, identifying emotional versus intellectual engagement, and demanding consistency from those who shape public opinion, we become active participants rather than passive recipients in our media ecosystem. And isn't that ultimately what media literacy is all about? Learning to engage critically with content rather than simply absorbing it? As this particular exchange fades from the news cycle, the lessons it offers about communication, accountability, and public discourse remain relevant. In a media landscape increasingly defined by personality rather than substance, moments like these provide valuable opportunities to examine not just what is being said, but how it's being said, and what happens when different approaches to communication collide in unexpected ways.